Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here, and yeah, I'm doing a Final Fantasy 11 video. Not really that surprising if you think about it. We've been covering a lot of lore-related stuff due to the collaboration between Final Fantasy 11 and Final Fantasy 14 and their alliance raid and Echoes of Vana'diel. If you're curious about some of those lore tidbits, I have like 4 or 5 videos on them, and plenty more to come when we actually get into the later tiers of Echoes of Vana'diel. That being said, Final Fantasy 11 itself is not something I regularly produce videos on. It's usually in short bursts. I've done Let's Plays in the past, which people have been asking for me to bring back, or when I think there's relevant news in regards to the game. Well, we just entered 2025, and part of that came with a Happy New Year post over on PlayOnline.com. Now, Final Fantasy XI, for all intents and purposes, is in maintenance mode. There aren't very many developers left on it, and they're largely just trying to fine-tune a handful of things while releasing some content and alterations of things in order to keep the people who are currently playing or may try the game at some point, give them a few more options, give them a few more things and ways they can power up or that they can experience things more easily. And that's what the New Year post here actually goes into, so much so that honestly, it almost feels like they're ramping up again in 2025, despite this now being the second or third time they have tried to fully retire the game. Back when they were originally doing 1.0 and they were trying to move people over, then with Rhapsodies of Vana'diel, and finally with the release of the Voracious Resurgence. You just can't keep the Final Fantasy XI dev team down. And with this New Year's post, we got to look at what they actually did in the last year, which is relatively impressive, and what they're planning to do for 2025, which for longtime players or for people who played back in the day, you're going to notice some pretty familiar topics coming up on here, things that you probably wondered about how they were doing in the current state of the game because you remember them how they were way back in the day. So, we have the post here. This is the producer and director. I think it's Yoji Fujito is the name of the current director and producer after the last guy stepped down. So, thanks to all of you, Final Fantasy XI welcomes another year of adventure within the wonderful world of Vana'diel. On behalf of the entire 11 team, which I can't imagine is more than like a dozen people at this point, I'd like to offer our utmost gratitude for your kind support. In last year's greeting, I mentioned that we would be providing regular maintenance and updates to the game so that everyone could enjoy playing it for a long time to come. To that end, we have made various updates that helped improve the game's playability, as well as numerous optimizations to its operating environment. So they list a few things here. Replacement of game servers is actually among the most important ones. So this is something that on the surface you really wouldn't notice, but Final Fantasy XI has been striving to reduce the cost of maintaining the game's servers. This is, of course, in the eventuality that they just stop producing content for it altogether, but it being a numbered Final Fantasy game, they wish to preserve it for pretty much ever. They always want the game to be available. Whether or not it always has a subscription is a question to be asked. But they've actually greatly reduced the cost of the game server so that it can run in perpetuity without actually costing Square Enix very much. Gamepad configuration adjustments. So Final Fantasy XI is a PlayStation 2 MMO. It's currently only available on PC, but it was originally released and made for the PlayStation 2. And so gamepad support is, of course, expected. But did you know that you couldn't actually rebind your gamepad while in the game for PC? You had to log out of the game and go into the settings there. They've added the ability to adjust it while you are in the game. After 22 years, they finally got around to that, 23 as of 2025. In addition to denote the addition of an icon to denote items that can be delivered to other characters, small quality of life thing, but welcome. Launch of Vanabout, that's something we don't need to get into right now. Just know that it's another thing that that operates within all of Final Fantasy XI has it's like multimedia in a sense, where there's like lots of little things like the We Are Vana'diel site, Vanabout, and a bunch of other stuff. Addition of level 9 in Besiege. This was interesting because they basically made Besiege level 99, which is still a pushover, mind you, but we'll get more into that in this update. And the addition of new Master Trial content. I'm going to be doing a separate video on that Master Trial. A Master Trial is Final Fantasy XI's equivalent of an Ultimate. It basically rallies together all the bosses from a major expansion, or that share a major theme, like Ultima and Omega, for example, or all of the bosses from Rise of Xylart, the Archangels, Camlanot, Eldnark, all as one singular encounter that lasts an hour, and you get a glam weapon for clearing it. The most recent one was just cleared after 10 months. And after reading what the encounter was asking people to do, I'm not surprised it took 10 months, because that's annoying. So those are the things they worked on last year. But then this update focuses on things they are going to be doing next year as well. They do also briefly talk about, like, they did like real life get-togethers and events and stuff. They, of course, bring up echoes of Vana'diel and how they've been enjoying people's reactions to it and watching videos of people actually going through it and, picking out all the Easter eggs and stuff. They also did an adventurer survey not that long ago with 13,000 responses. So we can probably extrapolate from that Final Fantasy XI probably has 15 to 20,000 active subscribers, some of which with multiple accounts. You can assume that most people would have replied to that. But I mean, honestly, I'm probably lowballing it, but it's besides the point. Like I said, Final Fantasy XI essentially updated to cost next to nothing to run. So they'll take whatever free subscriptions that they can get from people who still want to play the game in its current form. So they have a whole highlight of the survey that you can actually look at. We're not going to go through that here. And then they'll always be referencing back to it whenever they're making additions. So finally, we get into 2025 for Final Fantasy XI. And reading a lot of this stuff, as someone who has dabbled in the last decade, quite a bit on and off, I've done most of the relevant content, all the relevant stories. I just haven't done like master trials, for example. This is intriguing, to say the least. So Final Fantasy XI is mostly a solo game at this point, as it is. But there are some activities that are frustratingly difficult to find groups for that are not solo capable. Now, I don't mean that in theory you couldn't actually solo the content. The entry requirements do not allow you to enter alone is the key thing. One of the best examples of this is from the 2013 expansion Seekers of Adulin Delve content. I would always need to find just a couple of other people. Not a big deal. Again, once we were inside, finding 2 other people to do Delve was not much of an issue. But it was still, it's something you had to do. There was no option but to find 3 people. And so even with the game being mostly solo, and there was actually still, for years, a bunch of instances of places where you could not use trusts. And it seems like they're basically trying to eliminate all of those situations. So, for many people play the game solo for various reasons, including instances when it is difficult to form parties or simply because they prefer to experience the game on their own. In fact, I always tell people, if you want to do Final Fantasy XI story, play on retail, blast through the story, and after these changes, it'll probably be a little bit easier. In order to provide such players with an extra challenge, we will be looking to power up the alter ego system and also taking another look at the entry requirements for battle content that requires players to form parties. Again, that means Delve will probably be brought down to just 1 person. Now, for an extra challenge, it just sounds like they are making it so that alter egos are now more approachable for higher end content. It's funny because a lot of content, even on its harder difficulties, because now a lot of content has like a very easy to very hard difficulty scaling, specifically in that of high tier battlefields. Powering up the alter egos effectively makes the hard and very hard difficulty slightly more accessible, whereas people effectively needed the best of the best gear, even remotely imaginable, to approach that stuff. So I'm really curious what this actually means to provide players with an extra challenge. Just powering up the alter egos doesn't, I don't know, that in most people's eyes that would just make it even easier. But I think they just mean that the alter egos are now able to approach tougher levels of content, which means the player can then approach tougher levels of content, knowing full well that even if they don't have other players, they can still experience some of the endgame things that were not the easiest to do. Is our hope that solo players can have the experience more in line with endgame content. This is really a maintenance mode kind of thing. Again, they're trying to build the game out in such a way that if they completely have to abandon it at any point, or it's just like development has stopped entirely, that none of the game is inaccessible. There are other aspects of the game that they could probably adjust in this regard. I don't expect them to do it anytime soon, and I think things like Master Trials will likely never approach that capability just because of what they ask of the player. But it's interesting to see them continue to expand upon the systems that have largely allowed the game to exist after its declining population and popularity, especially post-2016 when Rhapsodies of Vana'diel was supposed to be the final story, and now it's 9 years later and the game is still operating and seeing these types of regular updates. Auto group improvement, I don't have a lot to say about. Auto group is like one of those things that's basically been used like less than 0.1% of the time. I know that in Final Fantasy XIV, you use the duty finder or the party finder to make groups. And auto group was supposed to be a method of just kind of getting people who are looking for a group in the same level range together. And it never really took off. So much so that, in fact, there's an add-on in Final Fantasy XI that acts as a sort of party finder for the game itself. Although I don't know many people who actually use it. Maybe there are some, but I've never spoken to a player who has actually like utilized it in any capacity. Looking into a system that at least partially organizes parties based on adventurers who want to play the same game content at any given time. So just making it easier to kind of form groups with everybody, even possibly using the assist channel. This doesn't really do that much. I think with the number of people playing the game and the number of people who do actually operate solo, or even with multi-boxing, you know, having 3 to 6 accounts active and doing things on their own, maybe it'll have some functionality, and maybe it'll be nice if somebody's looking to help a new player with something. Like somebody could be like, oh, you know, I'm in auto group for Rhapsodies of Vana'diel's final boss. Normally I have to go into town and shout and be like, hey, you know, that's what I had to do for Voracious Resurgence. I went into town and I was like, looking for Voracious Resurgence final boss, help, can I have it? You know, just a bunch of auto-translate nonsense. And I eventually was able to put together a group of 6, and then the video of me clearing the final encounter is on my YouTube channel. So I don't know how much this is going to get used, but people might use it as another means of looking for recruitment on the few servers that are largely active. I actually wonder if this helps servers that aren't that active more than it helps servers that are active. Servers that average 300 or 400 players online at a time. It might be possible that those servers could utilize this feature a bit more appropriately than the servers that already have so many people and so much power creep because of the number of people and the amount of gil that flows through the game. That it probably doesn't have as much of an impact there. Now, this is where things get a little more interesting. Revitalizing existing content and character leveling adjustments. So to be clear, leveling in Final Fantasy XI nowadays is super easy. I've released several videos of me leveling from 1 to 99 in 6 hours. Of course, that's not the first job on the character. That's not a fresh character. But it gives you a pretty healthy idea. Now, granted, after you hit 99, you then need to farm 2,100 job points, which can be quite time-consuming. And then the master level system that comes after that is on a whole different level. Starts off pretty clean, but it gets really crazy the amount of time that it takes to get to the higher master levels. So I'm curious about that because it's already pretty easy. But the big thing is revitalizing existing content. And we're actually going to get into the January update post after this because it gives us a little bit more insight about what they're doing. So, they added higher level support for Besieged, which was a very popular activity in the Treasures of Otter Gone expansion, and they plan to continue to do that. They're going to be adding item level support to it, which once something starts getting item level support, it generally approaches being rewarding enough for both newer players to consider doing it and existing players to maybe consider doing it for like certain jobs and certain pieces of equipment. So that may actually give Besieged a bit of value, and it may actually make it to the point where it's challenging on servers, which, again, some servers don't have a super large population, does come with a bit of a concern at the same time. Now, refreshing the Limbus area content is interesting, and again, we're going to get into the January post to talk about that in a little bit. Large amount of content has been added to the game over the years, which means it can be difficult to know where to start when leveling up your character. Therefore, we are considering ways to help you progress through quests, such as adjustments to the Records of Eminence, or by reducing the number of upgrade steps needed for your equipment. So Records of Eminence is basically a quest system that you can scroll through and activate anywhere in the game. It's literally, you just go into the menu and you just click through the objectives, say, I want to do that one, or that one. Most of the time, they're fairly generic, like kill 100 enemies, or do this amount of damage, certain number of times. And then there's ones that have daily restrictions, weekly restrictions, and some of them even one-time restrictions, doing certain job-related quests or completing story missions and stuff like that. So the idea of them making adjustments may mean that they're going to lower a lot of the requirements for some of the grindable Records of Eminence stuff. After you've done a lot of the first-time stuff, the repeatable portions, they're not bad. You keep them active all the time, but they definitely don't feel like a major contributing factor. They're just something that's kind of there, and they occasionally happen. So it sounds like those, like kill a couple hundred enemies, which is repeatable, or deal over 500 damage. Those will probably have their requirements, the number of times it takes to proc those things brought down, and they might bring them down across the board to make sure that newer players feel like they can kind of zoom through those early processes, especially on a newer character, relatively quicker. The second one is interesting, reducing the number of upgrades needed for your equipment. Anyone who played back in the level 75 days is probably wondering if their old equipment is any good. And the answer is some of it is. The main reason being is that stuff like artifacts or relics can be up-leveled. And I say up-leveled instead of leveled up because, quite frankly, they're only gaining levels. I don't know. I have a logic behind it, but effectively, you take it from 75 and you raise its level to 80, and then to 85, and then to 90, and then to 95, and then to 99, and then to 99 upgrade 1, and then to 99 upgrade 2, and then to 99 upgrade 3, and then you got to afterglow the damn thing. So there's just such a high volume of steps that are not fun. most of the time. It's busy work, to say the least, which, to be fair, is what Final Fantasy 11 is good at. But it's really annoying when you're a new player to be told you have to do all of this for all these different pieces of equipment just to have any sort of even basic power at the max level. I mean, and that includes, gathering materials to do those upgrade steps or killing certain enemies. It sounds like they're going to cut back on that, which is probably a good idea. This change should help players gain access to higher level equipment more easily. And and some people might go, oh, why would they do that? Because that's entry level stuff. The other stuff is still going to take a while. It's not quick to do a lot of the other stuff, especially if you include like trying to get drops. Looking at you, Malignant Set. That Malignant Set has not played nice with me at all. I think I have a hat, and that's it. Some of you will understand that. Some of you won't. Please note that while we are trying to decide the exact specifications and timelines of such efforts, we are rather close to finalizing things. So like all this stuff is already in the works. They're also finally adding improvements, additional automaton attachments, and blue magic sets a priority. So Puppet Master is my favorite job in 11, but quite frankly, it just doesn't have enough stuff to be useful in most scenarios. In the few places where Puppet Master is good or even great, they're very, very niche situations. Other than that, it's just kind of fun at times. Whereas Blue Mage is cracked all the time, and the fact that they're getting new stuff is even crazier because they're already like... I'll say this, it depends, because in like group content, I don't usually see that many Blue Mages unless the content's pretty easy. Or at least not like of the upper scale difficulty. I usually don't see that many Blue Mages in like really high end parties when people say, oh, we cleared with this. It's usually in like stuff that's like moderate, up to like moderate difficulty that I do see Blue Mage. But to be fair, that's just anecdotal. But Puppet Master definitely needs it. There's a lot of stuff Puppet Master could use. And then they just show a few menus here. I don't recognize anything new on the Puppet Master one. And quite frankly, I barely recognize Blue Mage stuff as a whole, but I think these are just pictures of the menus. I don't think there's anything else here. And then, first ensure the game is able to continue to operate smoothly. Our development and operations team will be giving a priority to the game's stability and ease of play throughout the year so we can provide you with the game experience you've come to expect while also making new additions and improvements. So, this gives some pretty decent scope. As you can see, despite being in largely maintenance mode, the Final Fantasy 11 team doesn't seem to be backing down. In fact, with the Echoes of Vana'diel section, it almost feels like they are a little bit revitalized, seeing Prish in all her glory and a lot of the Final Fantasy 11 stuff hosted over in Final Fantasy 14. That being said, January's update posted for the first time, and I know it's completely off, but that's because I'm stupid. So let me adjust this over, because, we're professionals here, and we're going to go all the way over here. So this is something that Final Fantasy 11 posts every single month. And most of the times it's like we're rotating our ambuscade bosses. It's a monthly content with rewards that reset monthly, and it just has a different set of bosses every time. But this is like already kind of a look into their process for the time. So Limbus update, which was just mentioned before. Limbus is an endgame content from Chains of Promethea, the game's second expansion, where a group of players effectively buys an entry-level item, hilariously a soap, and they enter and they have a certain amount of time to complete the objectives. They can earn more time while they're in there, and it eventually culminates in defeating Proto-Omega and Proto-Ultima as the endgame bosses. It hasn't seen an update in a very long time, even though some of its rewards have actually remained relevant up to this point, at least especially to entry-level endgame players. They are actually going to be updating it. Now, what's interesting is in order to adapt the area commonly referred to as the sea to everyone's current level. Now, that statement in isolation is strange because this update seems to be about Limbus, but Limbus is only in C. Limbus is not all of C. C is the zone known as Altair. It's where absolute virtue actually resides. So those of you who know all about that, who have done Baldesion Arsenal or even just aware of it, that's C. On top of that, Promethea, who I do think is a boss we will see as part of the Echoes of Vana'diel, probably towards the very end, I fully expect he's also from C. He's the end boss of the Chains of Promethea expansion. But referring C being everyone's current level is very different than Limbus being everyone's current level. Because C would imply that all of the jailers in Absolute Virtue would see power-ups, which is strange because there are higher level versions of those exact bosses in the Rhapsodies of Vana'diel storyline. You do go to these zones called Eska, and in Eska, not Escarum, Escaruan Gardens, where we go, you know, to fight the Archangels. That's the outer zone that you see in the Echoes of Vana'diel raid story. Eska has higher level versions of all those bosses that are largely similar to their original forms. So that's interesting. We'll be making major changes to the content structure and the monsters that appear within Limbus. We'll provide more specific details once we finalize content specifications, but our goal is to implement the changes in a way that makes them independent of group type. So that effectively means solo play. It means that all of the objectives kind of work for solo play, but also that they're updating it to make it so that it's relevant to current players. So if you're a player who's freshly level 99, it might be something that you can approach. Now, interestingly enough, they can't just revise it while it's active. Apparently, they need to temporarily shut the entire content down starting next month in February of 2025. All the rewards that were currently obtainable in there, they are going to move them someplace else while they're doing this so that they're not completely off limits. So it's not going to be like, oh, you can't do those upgrades for a short time. So that's the ancient beast coins and upgrade materials, chips, etc., etc. They're going to be available. The upgrade materials and beast coins will be available elsewhere. The chips are essentially only part of Limbus, so they don't really need to do that. You no longer need ancient beast coins or items to take on Limbus, so there's no need for you to stockpile them in anticipation. Yeah, so you don't even need the old items. They're also adding another high-tier mission battlefield. So high-tier mission battlefields are them taking the old endgame encounters, usually parts of the story like the Shadow Lord encounter or the Archangels, and bringing them up to level 99 and then giving them 5 difficulties, like I mentioned earlier, from very easy to very hard. And each of those usually comes with new mechanics. Like from normal onward, they have some sort of additional effect. On very hard, they have like adds and like whatever. It adds a few mechanics to each of the fights. They are doing this with the final boss of Rhapsodies of Vana'diel, the Cloud of Darkness. And that is a mission that even at 99, if you're a new player, can be kind of frustrating on its own. The idea of there being a high-tier mission battlefield version is certainly interesting. And it also means it comes with new endgame rewards for players that are looking to get into it. Normally, the way the rewards work in these is that on very easy, all of the rewards are ultra rare, but you can still theoretically get them. As soon as you get to like normal or hard or very hard, then the drop rate increases considerably. So it usually means that new players, if they are really, really persistent, they can grind out very easy to try to get a major upgrade much earlier than the players who are qualified to do very hard and may be able to get it more quickly. It does also mean that people murk these kind of things like, oh, I'll solo very hard for you so you can get the loot. And that's like, we've seen that as well. But that's another high tier mission battlefield. So we have a high tier mission battlefield, the reworking of Limbus. Ambuscade is just rotating bosses, and then there's just like new titles and some other new items that are available here. Oh, the producer-director, Yoji Fujita. Look, there it is. I was right. Was it Yoji? Yori? Yoji. Yeah, sorry. I wanted to make this video because I upon seeing that they were doing these updates and their Happy New Year mission and everything, I was like, this game really refuses to die. Like, every turn, I think I'm going to stop hearing anything about what Final Fantasy XI is doing. I find out Final Fantasy XI is doing something that they should have done a decade or more ago, and they're finally getting around to now. Don't forget, for those of you who haven't installed the game, they updated the install process as well. A, our internet's way better now, so even with the throttled process of doing it the old-fashioned way, it doesn't take as long. But B, they effectively allow you to download torrents of the installation, and that has way more files on it than the base install does, so it speeds up the install by a massive amount. It comes with its own instructions, because nothing can ever be simple, and Play Online is baked. Oh, it also says Yuji. By the way, I missed it, but it does also say Yoji Fujita to the like left. Can I grab this? All right, I'm being stupid. Here we go. Yeah, it said Yoji Fujita up there on the top left as well. And it's just, I don't know. It's just such an interesting thing that I felt compelled to make a video talking about Final Fantasy XI after seeing these types of updates, because I rag on this team for being like 6 to 12 people, like stuffed in a closet in like one of Yoshi P's side rooms in CS3. But you can clearly tell that even amongst the limited dev team that is remaining, that they still really want to do a lot with Final Fantasy XI. And every single time the dev team starts to look like they're a little bit like more compelled to develop for it, the game actually goes on an upward trend of new features and new content. So the fact that we're now seeing, after what was, you know, there was that one thing last year with the new Battlefield, but it was largely quality of life updates. And same with the year before that even. When Voracious Resurgence itself actually finished, largely that people were just waiting for Voracious Resurgence, which did come with a lot of its own stuff as well. But that's been the ebb and flow of 11. So seeing that now, what will be the 23rd year, as of May 2025, it will be the 23rd year of service for the game, that despite the game not being at its peak, despite the game not being in a position where most people would consider it worth their time, the dev team is still pretty much dedicated to making it the best possible experience that it could be within the bounds of what the game itself actually is. And I felt like that was just worthy of a quick video, you know, going over some of the things they're doing, some of the issues they're tackling. I mean, for God's sake, they didn't even mention it. They added Fantasias effectively in the last couple of years, something that, you know, us in 14 were like, we've had that for a long time. They have had no way to change your character appearance in Final Fantasy 11 prior to the feature that they added. I say it's a Fantasia. It's really like, it's a feature that you can go to the station and buy. It's not like its own item or anything. You know what I mean? It's just like, oh, I want to change my character's appearance. Let me put in my credit card information, blah, blah, blah. And yeah, it's wild to see that the dev team still has this kind of passion for the game and that they still largely feel encouraged, not only by the people who do still play, but by, I'd say probably by CS3 itself. And again, Echoes of Vana'diel probably playing a decent role in reinvigorating them. Now, I know a lot of people always say the same thing. Anytime I talk about Final Fantasy XI, there are a couple of statements that always come up. They should make it free to play, or they should include the sub with 14. Free to play, I think, will eventually happen when it is in full maintenance mode and none of the developers are remaining. They are preparing it for such a time. That's why getting the game servers to cost basically nothing to run so that a numbered Final Fantasy can be online forever is one of the things that they've been working to achieve in the case that they just decide that it's worth having just to exist. So at some point when the game is no longer getting active development, I do think it will go free to play at that point. Might still be buy to play, but not monthly subscription. As for the combining sub with 14, Yoshi P has teased the idea several times. I still don't think that's going to happen. They might make it at some point so that being subscribed to 14, that means you don't have to pay the box price for 11, but I don't think from a business standpoint they will see the same value in it unless they can justify the increase in player base making up for the potential revenue loss. So generally speaking, when people want to play 11, when they actually want to play 11, they pay for a subscription to 11. If it's included with the sub to 14, it will likely cost, I'm going to say $8 more per month. Not the usual, but even then, that's a whole nother thing. Final Fantasy XI subscription is like $1 for the subscription, $11.99 for the first character, and then $1 for every character after that, plus $2 per Mog Ward. Some of that's familiar. The Mog Wardrobe thing's familiar to retainer havers, but it wouldn't be free. It wouldn't be included in 14 subscription. I know people will be like, oh, WoW includes WoW Classic. It's not quite the same. I understand the logic behind that, but I don't think they'll ever include it with the 14 sub at no additional cost. And they've even said that there actually are some problems with including 11 with 14 subscription. And I know people will say they did it before, but that's because they were trying to get people to go from 11 to 14. And we all see how that went with 1.0. So I wouldn't hold my breath on either of those. Generally speaking, you're still looking at free login months for people who used to play and maybe want to jump back in, or you're looking for sales and the first 30 days being free for anyone who wants to try it new. Plus, whenever you want to pay a subscription to then go back and try it again later down the line. So, but the dev team is still trying. The dev team is still putting in effort and is still working to keep improving the game and even add new contents on top of what's already there, which I think it would be a surprise to a lot of people, and thus I felt was warranted for this video. But yeah, that was just, it's 2025, and I wanted to start on something that was a little bit, it's a brighter look on what is otherwise, quite frankly, a largely, past its day MMO. One that, people still hold a special place in their heart for. I have one, but I will not play 11 long term. I will not do current 11 endgame, nor any of the alternatives that come with Final Fantasy 11 as a potential to play. You know what I mean. I don't want to play any private servers. I have no interest in that shit. But that's going to be a wrap for this video. Like I said, I do have one other Final Fantasy 11 video that I would like to make regarding the Master Trial, because Final Fantasy 14 players always ask what endgame content's like in 11, and endgame content in 11 nowadays is bonkers stupid. And then people have been asking for the Let's Play for Final Fantasy 11 to return to start a brand new character. And if I do that, I would like to release those videos every Wednesday. So let me know about that in the comment section below if that's something you're interested. I would have to voice all of the cutscenes myself. Which, yeah, that's why it's once every week. Because that's going to be exhausting. But I know there's some interest for it because of Echoes of Vana'diel, so I would like to oblige if I possibly can. But anyway, that's going to be a wrap. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe. And if anything else interesting happens with 11, outside of Echoes of Vana'diel, stuff like this, then I'll be sure to toss that information your way. But thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Until then, take care.